Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections, along with a daily mains answer writing program. In the analysis part, we'll first have a comprehensive discussion in the context of the proposed 131st Amendment Bill and the subsequent delimitation. Herein, we'll talk about the process of delimitation, the associated challenges, and the way forward. Then, in the next topic, we'll have a discussion regarding the menace of food wastage, the associated challenges, and the measures required. Then, in the prelims pointer section, we'll have a discussion regarding 5 different topics from a special perspective of the upcoming prelims examination, along with the value addition. So, stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to the proposed 131st constitutional amendment and the subsequent delimitation, the real debate. See, what you'll have to understand is that there has been a constant debate surrounding the delimitation. Now, you would ask, what is delimitation? In simple sense, it refers to the allocation and readjustment of seats with respect to the House of the People, that is Lok Sabha, and with respect to the legislative assemblies of various states. And we'll also discuss in great detail ahead. So, there has been a constant debate surrounding the issue of delimitation. And what is the reason for that? The basis of delimitation exercise is the population. Now, what you'll have to understand is that in the years of 1960s and 70s, we had many South Indian states which intensively worked to control the overall fertility rates. They came up with various family planning measures. They invested heavily in the social sectors, in education, in health, in women empowerment. And ultimately, what they achieved was the control with respect to the fertility rates. Over there, with time, the total fertility rates, the TFR, it almost reached the replacement level, or in fact, reached below replacement level. And at the same time, what we were witnessing was, in the Hindi heartland, in the North Indian states, the population was booming. So South Indian states were really concerned. They were concerned. Why? Because the constitution mandates that the delimitation would be carried out on the basis of the census figures, on the basis of the population. Now, we have worked as far as for population control measures is concerned. So instead of being incentivized, we would be penalized. So what the government of the day, what the parliament did at that point of time, it came up with the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. And it froze the seats. It said that now we will freeze the seats at 543 for the next 25 years. Subsequently, we had another amendment through which this freeze was again extended for a period of 25 years. Now, what we have been witnessing is that in the year 2023, the government came up with the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, 106th Constitutional Amendment Act, which promises that we would have 1/3 of the total seats in the House of the People, that is Lok Sabha, and in the legislative assemblies of various states reserved for women. What the amendment said was that the implementation of it would take place after the delimitation is carried out, after the census figures have come. Now, what you'll have to understand is the debate that ideally the census should have been conducted in 2021. But because of the COVID crisis, we did not go with this. We were not able to go with this. So the next census would have been in 2031. But right now, what the government is saying is that we are going to have the census exercise is going on. And now we'll be going with the delimitation exercise. And delimitation would be based on 2011 census. So that is what is being proposed in 131st Constitutional Amendment Act. Now, what many of the political commentators and the opposition parties are saying is that first of all, you came up with this Nari Shakti Vandana Adhiniyam. You did not implement right from that moment itself, because the census figures of 2021 were not there. So ideally, the next census would have been in 2031. So the implementation would have taken almost a decade. Now you are saying that we are going to use the figures of 2011. But at the same time, you are also talking about the delimitation exercises with respect to the overall seats in the Lok Sabha and in the legislative assemblies of the states, which is going to exponentially increase to almost 850. And this would cause a major disadvantage to the South Indian states, because the very basis is the population. So what many of the political commentators are saying that this is a political cover. Nari Shakti Adhiniyam or Women's Reservation Act is basically a political cover to give undue advantage to the North Indian states because they have a major share of the population. This is the overall background. So what we'll try to look at is first, what is delimitation? We'll talk about what this particular amendment bill proposes. And then we'll talk about what are the challenges involved and then the way forward. Very important topic as far as the Indian Constitution is concerned, the Parliament and federalism. Also the state legislature. Also, once we talk about the center-state relations. Very, very important topic. Now, before we understand what is the delimitation, we should understand the concept of constituency. See, we have India. Now, once we talk with respect to the House of the People, that is Lok Sabha, what we have done is we have divided territorially India into specific areas. Every area, what we call as a constituency with a specific set of people. So what is a constituency? It's a particular area. It's a defined area with a specific set of people. And from that, we have the representative who is elected. As far as the House of the People is concerned, the Lok Sabha is concerned, we use the first past the post system. Whoever secures the maximum number of seats in the election, that person is declared elected. Similarly, we have constituencies as far as the states are concerned. Once we talk about the elections to the state legislative assemblies. Now, what you have to understand is that population is a dynamic phenomenon. It keeps on changing. So there is a need to adjust the seats on the basis of the population. There can be a particular state which witnesses a heavy population growth in this particular area and a less population growth in this area. So there is also a need to readjust the seats within this particular state. Therefore, we carry out the process of delimitation, the readjustment of seats. I hope it is clear. So delimitation is the process of fixing the number of seats and the boundaries with respect to that territorial constituency. Okay. Now, for the Lok Sabha as well as the legislative assemblies, is there a constitutional mandate? Is there a constitutional mandate? Yes. We have Article 82, which talks with respect to the House of the People, Lok Sabha, and we have Article 170, subclause 3, which talks with respect to the legislative assemblies of the state, that we need to carry out the readjustment of the seats on the basis of the census. Now, what you'll have to understand is that this is also very important as far as the exercise of delimitation is also very important as far as the reserved seats are concerned. Why? Because we have the marginalized communities, the SCs and the STs, who have faced historical injustices. So it is really very important to give them the representation on the basis of their real numbers. And this delimitation exercise, if it is carried out according to the population, according to the real numbers, this would make sure that the SCs and the STs get their due share in the overall seats. I hope it is clear. Now, who performs the delimitation? We have the Parliament, which according to the Act, with the help of the passage of an Act, comes up with the Delimitation Commission, right? So we have an Act of the Parliament which is passed, which basically comes up, which frames the Delimitation Commission. What this Delimitation Commission comprises of? The chairman of the Delimitation Commission is a former judge of the Supreme Court. Then you have the Chief Election Commissioner as the second member. And then you have the respective state election commissioners of various states as the member. So this is the overall powerful body. Why we say that Delimitation Commission is a very powerful body is for two reasons. The very first reason is that whatever orders the Delimitation Commission is coming up with, that is, whatever Delimitation Commission says with respect to the overall seats, the readjustment of the seats on the basis of the census, it has to be agreed upon. It cannot be questioned in any court of law. That's the very first thing. The orders of the Delimitation Commission cannot be questioned in any court of law. Second, whenever these orders of the Delimitation Commission are placed before the Parliament or the legislative assemblies, they cannot be modified. The order cannot be modified. Remember these two things, very, very important. In fact, the UPSC has also asked this in the preliminary examination, right? So very, very important. Now, see how many times the Delimitation Commission, the delimitation exercise has been carried out. It has been carried out 4 times. 1952, 62, 72 and 2002. This is what you have to understand. Now, what are going to be the principles which we would follow as far as the allocation and readjustment of the seats is concerned. We'll again talk about the chronology, so please pay attention. What are the principles? These principles are enshrined in Article 81. The very first principle says that there shall be allotted to each state a number of seats in the House of the People in such manner that the ratio between the number and the population of the state, that is the number allotted to that particular state and the population of the state, so far as practicable, is same for all the states. Means what? That we are trying to assure an interstate parity. This ratio should remain constant. What is the ratio? Ratio of the number of seats allotted to that particular state and the population of that state, so as to ensure interstate parity. I hope it is clear. Second principle, what it says, each state shall be divided into territorial constituencies in such a manner that the ratio between the population of each constituency and the number of seats allotted to that particular state, so far as practicable, the same throughout the state. What does it imply? It talks about the intrastate parity among the various constituencies in that particular state. The very first principle, what is it is trying to say? Let's compare UP and Kerala. We'll make sure that this ratio remains constant for UP and Kerala. The second provision talks about within UP itself. I hope it is clear. Interstate and intrastate parity. These are the two principles which are enshrined in Article 81 itself. Now, what you'll have to understand is that, as I told you in the beginning, that in 1960s and 70s, we had many of the South Indian states which intensively worked on family planning measures because they had this a good foresight. They knew that if we go with the population explosion, we'll not be able to bear the fruits of development. So what they did was they intensively focused on the family planning measures, the education, the health, and that is the reason you see the states like Tamil Nadu or Kerala, that they have very good human development indicators. And at the same time, what we were witnessing is that Hindi heartland was busy in its own thing. There was an exponential population explosion which was taking place. So there was a real concern that if you will use, because what the Constitution says, that census has to be the basis of delimitation. And what census figures would reveal? It would reveal the exponential increase in the population of the North Indian states, the Hindi heartland, and less growth rate of the population in the Southern Indian states. So ultimately, the North Indian states, if we go by the census, would be having an undue advantage. Instead of focusing upon the family planning measures, they would in fact be incentivized. And on the other hand, the South Indian states, who basically focus on the family planning measures, control the overall fertility rates, they would be penalized. So that was a real concern. And therefore, what really happened, the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, it froze the seats. And it said that seats would remain frozen on the basis of 1971 census. In 1971, the overall population of the country was almost 54 crores, 0.2 crores. See why we are trying to elaborate, so that you understand each and every step of it. And very important topic. So the overall population, according to the 1971 figures, was almost 54.2 crores. And total number of seats were 543, which we have till this particular day. So on an average, the per seat allocation of people was almost 10.1 lakh. Okay. What it was later felt, this was during the time of Indira Gandhi. Later it was felt that we now need to basically extend this freeze, which was initially done for a period of 25 years, for another 25 years. So we had the 84th Constitutional Amendment Act, and it said that we would freeze the seats till 2026. However, it said one thing, that though the total number of seats as far as the House of the People is concerned, the Lok Sabha is concerned, would remain frozen at 543, but we would go for the readjustment and rationalization. Bhai, ye dekhiye, let's say this is the state of, hypothetically imagine that this is the state of UP. Now, let's say that some areas of UP have witnessed high population growth rates, and it has total, let's say 20 seats, for example. And some areas have witnessed low population growth rates. So there has to be the readjustment inter se within UP itself on the basis of the population. So what 84th Constitutional Amendment said, that we would fix the overall number of seats which have been given to different states at 543. But we would go for the readjustment and rationalization on the basis of 91 census. Further, we had the 87th Constitutional Amendment Act, which said that this readjustment and rationalization, total seats would remain same, 543. This would be on the basis of 2001 census. So, ये कहानी है. This is the story so far. But why there has been a controversy now? Delimitation has always been in the news. Southern Indian states have time and again said that we cannot go with the current population growth rates, because if we'll go by that, you'll have the political power would be skewed in favor of the North Indian states. We cannot allow that. But the controversy is what has changed recently, that the government has proposed the 131st Amendment Bill. And what different leaders are saying, in fact, let's leave the leaders. Let's talk about what the government is saying. Government is saying that we are very clear as far as the women reservation is concerned. Previously, what they said, that the women reservation would come into effect after delimitation is carried out, after the census figures have been published, once this act came into being. So there was no census. 2021 census did not take place at that particular moment of time. And the ideal census would have taken place in 2031. Then census figures come, and again you have the Delimitation Commission constituted. So that would ultimately, what we would have seen is the implementation of the Women Reservation Act in the elections of 2034, almost a decade after. And this, what many political commentators said, that this is a political sham. The government is not really inclined to reserve the seats. Now, what the government has done is, it has come up with 131st Amendment Bill, and it has proposed far-reaching changes along with the Delimitation Bill. What it is saying is that we are going to implement this Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, the women reservation, on the basis of 2011 census. So we'll have the delimitation. And delimitation with respect to the overall seats would be carried out by the Delimitation Commission. And the census figures which would be used by the Delimitation Commission would be 2011. Because what the Constitution says, and we'll discuss, Constitution very clearly says that the delimitation exercise can be carried out after the census figures have come after the year 2026. And once you have done the delimitation. But now there is no requirement. And we'll see what are the changes being proposed through this particular amendment, right? So this is the overall gist. This is the criticism. And government has proposed the 131st Constitutional Amendment Bill and the Delimitation Bill. Let's talk about what are the critical shifts by is bill say. With the help of this particular bill, what the government is trying to do. The very first thing is Article 81. Article 81 talks about the overall seats which are to be allocated to Lok Sabha. The number right now is 543. We have actually 550, right? 530 for the states and 20 for the UTs. It says that now we'll increase it to 850. We'll increase it to 850. You can just see. In Article 81, we'll have 815 members chosen by direct elections from the territorial constituencies of the state. So 850, we'll have 815 from the states. And then we'll have the rest 35 from the UTs. So you are increasing the overall number of seats from 543 to that of 850. Clear? Next thing what the government is saying is that the population, over here it says population means population as ascertained as at such censuses as the parliament may by law determine. What the constitution says, that ideally the delimitation should take place on the basis of the census figures, latest census figures, right? So ultimately what you have to understand, that over here now the parliament would decide that which census we would choose. We can also go for a particular census which predates 2026 by 42nd Amendment, 84th Amendment, 87th Amendment. What they said, that seats are to be remain frozen, and what we'll have is the next census would be carried out on the delimitation. The next readjustment of the seats would be carried out on the basis of the delimitation on the basis of the next census which is carried out. But now there is no such requirement. The population would be now ascertained by a law made by the parliament. That would be by simple majority. So the parliament would decide now, and that too on the basis of simple majority, which census we have to take. Got it? Then we have the next, which is Article 82. So what Article 82 does is, I've already told this, but again I'm repeating, that in the Article 82, we have this particular condition that initially 42nd, 84th and 87th Amendment, what they did, they have frozen the seats till the year 2026. What they say is that now, whatever the delimitation exercise would take place, it would be on the basis of the subsequent census which would be taken. But now there is no such requirement. Why? Because the third proviso, which mentions all these things, it has been omitted. Now it would be decided by the government that which census figures are to be used. This has created panic in the minds of the South Indian states. I hope it is clear, right? Then we have Article 334. 334 again said the same thing. 334 relates to 334A in specific, relates to the reservation of seats with respect to the women in the Lok Sabha and in the legislative assemblies. What it said was Nari Shakti Bandhan Adhiniyam. What it said that we will have the implementation of it after the delimitation exercise is carried out, after the relevant census figures have come out, once this particular act has come into being. So ideally it should have been on the basis of 2031 census. But now what the government says is, shall come into effect after an exercise of delimitation is undertaken for this purpose. Now the population would be decided, that which population to take would be decided by the government through a law, by the parliament through a law, simple majority. And once the delimitation is done, then on that basis we'll have the reservation of the seats. And the delimitation bill, what it proposes, that we would take into consideration 2011 census. They would constitute a delimitation commission and it would consider 2011 census. So all the hindrances, all the, whatever was blocking the government from conducting the delimitation, they have been resolved. They have been erased. Now there is no foundation on the government, according to this, if it is passed, 131st Amendment Bill. So that has led to a lot of issues in the minds of South Indian states. They're saying, what you're doing, you promised us that we would keep the same proportion of seats. Even if we carry out the delimitation on the basis of the census, we would keep the same proportion of the seats. But that is not being done. Undue advantage would be exercised by the North Indian states. And we'll see what are the issues. But usse pehle, before that, what is the significance of delimitation? Is it really important? The answer is yes. It gives fair representation. Why? Because as I said in the beginning, it follows two principles. What we are talking about, what we often talk about is one person, one vote, one value. So it tries to realize this particular principle if proper delimitation is carried out. Second, equity. It tries to maintain the equity. It makes sure that there is no underrepresentation or overrepresentation. That is also the good part of delimitation. Next, reserved seat for SCs and STs. So SCs and STs have faced the historical injustices. In order to give them the due share in the overall seats and according to the exact numbers, the real numbers, delimitation is very important. Next, we have federalism. So we have the constituents of the overall Indian states. So states have their own political power. So they must be in a position to exercise the political power in the right manner. And that was also highlighted in the S.R. Bomai case, where the Supreme Court very clearly said that states are not mere appendages to the center. They have their own constitutional existence. So federal aspect is also very important. But what are the issues? Critical issues kya hai? Pehli baat, the very first is census and timing controversy. First of all, you delayed the 2021 census. See, we understand there was COVID-19. Totally understand. But what after that? You could have conducted the census in 2024 or 23, but no. You didn't do that. And then you came up with the Nari Shakti Bandhan Adhiniyam, saying that that would be applicable after the census figures have come and the delimitation is done. So ideally, you basically postponed it to 2031 census. Now, what you are doing is you are saying you're completely changing the whole situation and saying that we would decide, Parliament by law would decide that what is to be the population, which census is to be chosen. Previously, there was a directive by the Constitution itself that after 2026, whatever census we'll have, on that basis, delimitation would be carried out, and then you can have the readjustment of seats. But now you have removed that barrier. What you are saying is that we would decide on what census. So it can go to a back date. That's the reason the latest published census is of 2011. So that is a critical issue. And now census is expected. It is going on. But again, it would take at least 2-3 years to come up with the data with respect to the census. Right? So that is the issue. 2011 census, why you are using 2011 census? You are saying, according to you, you are saying that we want to, as soon as possible, implement the women reservation. But that was said by the opposition in 2023, once you came up with the Nari Shakti Vandana Adhiniyam, that why don't you implement the women reservation on the basis of 2011 census? So, in the guise of, or as a political cover of women reservation, what you are doing is you are doing an overall. You are completely changing the paradigm, the situation. As a cover, as a political cover, that is the women reservation, you are giving undue advantage to the North Indian states because they would have more number of seats. We'll see. So that is the main issue. Seat redistribution effect. Look at this. If we'll have, let's talk about this. So if we'll increase the seats from 543 to that of the 850, what would really happen? And that too on the basis of 2011 census. What would really happen? Look at this. The Hindi heartland, the states in the Hindi heartland, they would see an increase in the overall seats from 38% to almost 43%. So the overall number of seats to these states in the Hindi heartland would increase from 38% to 43%. What about the South Indian states? The overall seats for the South Indian states, they would decrease from 24.3% to that of the 20%. For northeastern states, it would decrease from 4.4% to that of 3.8%. So this is an undue advantage. That is what we are talking about. Right? And core federal concern. Because ultimately, if the political representation, what people are saying, that you have the elections in 2029. Now you are going for this particular amendment and then delimitation based on 2011 census. What you are doing is that you are giving undue advantage in the form of more seats to the Hindi heartland, where you have a political advantage. Political commentators are saying this. And this would compromise the interests of the South Indian states. Just for political advantage, you are doing this. Core federal concern, done. So because the political power is based upon the representatives, that would be reduced. The political power of the South Indian states would be reduced. Next is southern states. They are being penalized. They worked intensively on the education, on health, increased the human development indicators, and instead of incentivizing them, you are reducing their political power by reducing the overall seats. That is the issue. Issue with government's assurance. Last year, Home Minister, the Honorable Home Minister, gave an assurance to the states that we would make sure that the proportion, the current proportion which we have, that would be maintained after delimitation. Current proportion with respect to different states would be maintained as far as seats redistribution is concerned. But right now what you are using is Article 81, the principle. You are using the proportionality on the basis of population, not the current proportion. Getting? So this is the main issue. What states are saying is that you are not, you promised us and you're not even following it. Then we have the democratic concerns. You are convening a special session to pass this particular bill. Did you go for a political debate? Did you go for a consensus? Did you float this bill among the opposition parties for its views? No. So there are democratic issues also, right? Then larger implication. What is the larger implication? That instead of using some rationale, some reason, some logic to have the delimitation, what you're using is pure majoritarian population logic. You are not using a rational basis. You are using the population, 2011 census. And that would give undue advantage to the South Indian states. That is what you have to understand. But what should be the way forward? The very first is decouple what the opposition said in 2023. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, a senior Congress leader, he has said the same thing. That decouple the women's reservation from delimitation. Because what he's saying is that you are using the women reservation as a political cover. And what this is basically leading to the backdoor delimitation on the basis of 2011 census. So why not you leave it? Don't increase the number of seats. Why you're increasing it to 850? Keep it 543. And implement the 33% reservation for women on the basis of rotation. That can also be done. But that the center is not doing, right? Because the allegations are, we have the elections in 2029. More number of seats would go to the north part. And that would give political advantage to a particular party. Maintain the federal balance. There has to be, even if you're increasing, why are you not increasing proportionally? What is the current proportion as far as 543 seats are concerned with respect to all the states? Why you're not having the same proportion? Because the share of the South Indian seats is going to decrease. We just saw that the share of the South Indian states would decrease from 24% to that of the 20%. But North Indian states would increase from 38% to 43%. So keep the proportion same. Then we have use fair formula. Telangana CM, Mr. Revanth Reddy, he has proposed a hybrid model. What he's saying is that if you are adding hypothetically, let's say 100 seats to the overall seats, divide this as 50 and 50. 50 seats should be distributed on the basis of population. Other 50 seats should be distributed on the basis of the state, that state's contribution to the overall GDP. So that those states who are basically working for development, they are not penalized. Getting? So we can have a hybrid model. Then we have build a political consensus. Very, very important. Float this bill for public discussions. You've just convened a special session and you just want it to be passed. There has been no political debate. Go for inter-party conferences, meetings, or give the bill to the parliamentary committees, either a select or a joint committee, having membership from various political parties. That would be in a better position to decide or to have some rationale, to have some logic in how the seats are to be redistributed. Then we have global models. We have, for example, EU. In the EU, we have the European Parliament. We have total 720 seats. They follow a system of digressive proportionality. What does it mean? Howsoever small the country is out of 27, howsoever big the country is, we will have a limit from 6 seats to that of 96 seats. So minimum 6 seats would be given and maximum 96, howsoever big population you have. So that can be followed, digressive proportionality. Or let's talk about the US. In the US, we have House of Representatives. The population, the seats, sorry, they have been kept at 435. From 1911 till 2020, the population has almost quadrupled, has increased 4 times. But the ratio of the seats to different states, it has remained the same. They have not increased the seats. So that can be also followed, what we are saying in the very first aspect. So what you'll have to understand is there are 3 very important points. First, we are not saying that delimitation is not important. Delimitation is important. But only population cannot be used as a basis. Because what it would lead to is a scenario where the states would feel, the South Indian states, that we worked on these parameters and we are being penalized for it. Instead of being rewarded, we are being penalized. Because the political power would now be concentrated, if we go by this particular amendment, it would be concentrated in the North Indian states, the Hindi heartland. The second aspect, what you'll have to understand is that it is about consensus, building a consensus with respect to the states, because delimitation would also happen in the states. Seats would increase, 170, Article 170. So there has to be a political consensus among various political parties. And what you have to understand is, why not we go with a hybrid model? Why can't we just have other bases as well? For example, the Finance Commission, while it considers the devolution of funds, the vertical devolution and the horizontal devolution, it is considering the aspects of states' contribution to GDP, however small. We are not debating that. But it has basically included this aspect. So population should not just be the basis. I hope it is clear, right? Let's have a mains practice question. It says, the proposed Constitution 131st Amendment Bill has reignited the debate between the population-based representation and federal equity in India. Critically examine. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write the answer because this is a very probable and important topic. And this is the only way to develop a solid base as far as answer writing is concerned. And if you're liking the initiative, do not forget to press the like button and also let us know in the comments. Let's go to the next topic. Come on to the next topic. This is about the menace of food waste. So we have a column which has been published in the Hindu. Over here, what the author is trying to say is that we are incurring a huge waste with respect to the food. And at the same time, we are also one of the countries which is severely malnourished. So there is a paradox. On one hand, we are one of the largest producers of food. And there is a lot of food which is being wasted. On the other hand, what we see is that still millions of people are undernourished. So this points towards a systemic issue, a systemic failure. What the author says is that on March 30th, we observe the day of International Day for Zero Waste. And this year's theme is the food waste. So he is trying to look into the various aspects of food waste. What are the causes and what should be the way forward, right? And we have tried to link the aspects of malnourishment, right? The context is that on March 30th, we celebrate the International Day of Zero Waste. And this year's theme is food waste. And there is a major contradiction. The contradiction is that we have a massive food wastage with respect to the households, with respect to the restaurants, caterers. And at the same time, we have widespread hunger. So why there is a contradiction? Why cannot we make sure that whatever excess food we have, which we are actually wasting, goes to those stomachs, goes to those people who are hungry, who really need food? So there are severe issues involved. Now, if you look at the global scenario of the food waste, what the author talks about is the report of UNEP of 2024, where the report highlights, it cites that globally, we have 1.05 billion tons waste of food. 1.05 billion tons of food is wasted annually. Can you just imagine? And this, if you look at the sector-wise contribution, we have households contributing almost 60%. You must have seen, there are leftovers on the plate and we just throw it, right? Food services, restaurants or other, the street vendors or whatever, almost 28%, and retail, 12%. Then what is the core issue? The core issue is not just individual behavior. It's not that people can be blamed or they're only the reason. There are issues with respect to the overall supply chains. There are inefficiencies in the overall supply chain with respect to the food production and its processing and its management and its decomposure. Then there are issues with respect to the consumption patterns. What we are witnessing is that the purchasing power of the people is increasing, right? The overall purchasing power of the people is increasing, and that is leading to a more of the consumption in society. Also in terms of the food. Food which is not really required, that is being consumed. A portion of it is left and that is being thrown. So there are consumption issues. So it's not just about the individual behavior. What the report says is that there are systemic issues, right? Hunger versus waste, a global paradox. Globally, 783 million people, they suffer from hunger. The menace of hunger. 783 million people. And at the same time, almost 3.1 billion people, they cannot afford a healthy diet. Almost 3.1 billion people. And at the same time, what we are witnessing is that we are having food waste of almost 1.05 billion tons. So there is a paradox. That is what you'll have to understand. Food waste coexisting with hunger. So this is a systemic failure which needs to be resolved by various policy interventions. Let's talk about India. So India ranks second globally as we talk about the food waste. Almost 70 to 80 million tons of food is wasted annually. 70 to 80 million tons of food is wasted. And if we look at the economic cost of it, it turns to almost 1.55 lakh crores. Can you imagine? We are wasting food which can be basically given to those who are malnourished, who are suffering from hunger. And that tunes to almost 1.55 lakh crores. Around 194 million people in the country are undernourished. Per capita generation of waste in India, it is almost 55 kg per year. And it is not that huge as compared to the other countries, for example, US or Germany. Germany, for instance, it has 75 kgs per year. But since India is a very big country, since we have a very large population, cumulatively, we become one of the largest producers of the food waste. I hope it is clear. Let's talk about the case study, which the author talks about in the article itself. It says that almost 8,200 tons of food grain was wasted in the Food Corporation of India storage systems in Punjab from the year 2019 till 2024. Food grains, almost 8,200 tons were wasted. And what the Niti Aayog said, it looked into this particular case, and what it found was that there were issues, systemic issues, because we did not have proper cold chain supply. We did not. What is cold chain supply? Cold chain supply. That, see, we have these food items. Food items are perishable. They have a low shelf life. So you need to keep them in cold environment, cold storages, so that their shelf life can be increased. And that would also, if the shelf life increases, that can also aid in the food processing, which does the value addition. That is the reason we are not able to focus whatever wastage we had, almost 70 to 80 million tons. Even if 1/10 of it could have been saved, even if 1/10 of it could have been processed, we could have earned a lot of money. But that is wasted because we don't have adequate cold chain supply systems. The storage systems are not good. The logistics is not good. The transportation facilities are not good. Right? So these are the issues. What is the environment impact of the food waste? The food waste itself, it contributes almost 8 to 10% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So let's say if food waste was a country as such, it would be world's third largest emitter after China and US. Can you just imagine? And plus, what you'll have to understand is that once food is wasted, it decomposes. And it leads to the emission of CH4, methane, a more potent, harmful greenhouse gas as compared to the carbon dioxide, because it has more of the global warming potential. Right? Then resource loss and sustainability. By whatever food you are wasting, let's say a bowl of rice, that is also leading to the loss of water, land and energy. Because 1 kg, in order to produce 1 kg of rice, almost 5,000 liters of water is required. Can you imagine? Just to produce 1 kg of rice, almost 5,000 liters of water is required. So if you are wasting even a few grams of rice or any food item, you're wasting liters of water, hundreds of liters of water. So that is the issue. What are the structural causes of food waste? The very first is poor post-harvest management. We harvest, we keep, but we don't store well. The facilities or the infrastructure with respect to the storage management is very minimal, is abysmal, is very poor. Then inadequate cold chain infrastructure. Let's say if we invest in the cold chain infrastructure, that would certainly lead to more of processing of the food. And that could, if we export that processed food, that can also earn us the foreign exchange. So that is what you'll have to understand. Weak supply chain logistics. We don't have the cold chain mobile units. Cold chain mobile units. You must have seen the big trucks having the refrigeration capacity. So why those are important? Because they can transfer the perishable commodities from one place to the other without affecting the quality. So we don't have that. Lack of data and monitoring. We don't have adequate data with respect to, and see, this is based on the surveys. Why don't we mandate, and this is one of the way forwards, why don't we mandate those commercial units like hotels that you need to basically invest in having or giving us pure data with respect to the food waste. Cultural acceptance of food wastage. We have basically accepted this. We are not really inclined. We are not really in that position, or we don't have that mindset that we should save the food. So this is a cultural mindset which we have been accustomed to. So we need to change that. What should be the way forward? Very first is strengthening the cold chain infrastructure. Because we are just processing almost 8% of the total food produced. Just 8%. So if we have proper cold chain infrastructure, this amount of the total food produced, which is being processed, can be increased. Once the food processing would increase, that would bring in more value addition, more income for those who are involved in the process. And if that food product is exported, processed food, we would also earn the exchange, foreign exchange. So this is one of the very important things. Cold chain mission should be launched. Legal framework for food redistribution. There has to be a ban on the destruction of edible food. We have many countries in the EU who completely ban the destruction of food. There can be the incentives. There can be the donation programs. People who have access to the food, grains or whatever, they can donate to those in orphanages, in old age homes. We can do that. But there is a will which is required, right? Empower the farmers, the first mile reforms. That they need to, farmers are the ones who are the ground, they are harvesting. So they need to be given the mechanized drying. There has to be the mechanized drying of the food products. There has to be the hermetic storage. What is hermetic storage? That you completely seal that product so that no air enters in that. You create a kind of a vacuum. You must have seen the vacuum packages, right? Then we have the MCUs, mobile cold chain units. They must be installed. Data and accountability. As I said, mandatory measurement and reporting of how much food you are wasting. Caterers, hoteliers, different people who are in the chain, who are commercially supplying the food and who are wasting a lot of food. Then behavioral and cultural change. This has to be made a part of the mindset itself. That food, whatever food we are wasting, that took a lot of water, land and energy. There's a lot of effort which is involved. So let's not waste the food, because we call food as Anna Brahma. It's almost equal to the God. So food should not be wasted. The author highlights a very critical issue of the food waste in India. And what he also says is that at the same time, we are wasting millions of tons of food. At the same time, we have a lot of issue with respect to the malnutrition, the undernourishment. So there is a paradox. And it's because we don't have proper policies in place. Or even if we have the policies, they are not being implemented properly. So very important topic, can be asked in the examination. Let's have a very small 10-marker question. Food waste in India reflects a paradox of abundance amid deprivation. Discuss the causes and the suggest measures to address the issues. Please make sure that you write, because that is very important. Let's go to the other section. Coming to the very first topic of the prelims pointers, we have the article which talks about balancing faith and ecology. Now, you must have seen that we have a lot of religious rituals, and sometimes these religious rituals, they go counter to the ecology principles. For instance, we have the rituals of offering milk or flowers to the rivers, to the flowing rivers. What it ultimately does is that, though it is a part of our religious belief, what it ultimately does is that it degrades the quality of the water. There is a lot of microbial growth which is witnessed, and that leads to the degradation of that water quality. The dissolved oxygen, it is reduced, and it also affects the aquatic life. So there's an article which has been published in the Hindu which talks about all these various scenarios can be important for the prelims. A 21-day religious ceremony at Pataleshwar Mahadev Temple in Madhya Pradesh's Sihor district, guided by Sant Shivanand Maharaj, culminated in a controversial ritual where almost 11,000 liters of milk was poured into the Narmada River. 11,000 liters of milk was poured into the Narmada River in what devotees described as a sacred offering on April 8th. The incident, where a tanker was seen pouring milk, sparked a debate between religious faith and environmental concerns regarding pollution. No official action has been taken by the Madhya Pradesh Pollution Control Authority or National Green Tribunal. Malnutrition in Madhya Pradesh has prompted the 700 crore Yashoda milk supply scheme, because there is a lot of malnutrition. So the government has come up with its own scheme. And at the same time, what we are witnessing is almost 11,000 liters of the milk has been flown into the river as a part of the religious practice, targeting 1.3 crore children through schools and Anganwadis. Experts and activists argue that 11,000 liters poured into Narmada could provide 44,000 glasses, feeding 2,200 kids daily for 20 days or supplementing 10,000 plus for a week at school programs. So that milk could have been used for enhancing the overall nutritional outcomes. What are the impacts of ritual offerings on aquatic ecosystems? Though culturally viewed as pure, environmental studies show that dairy effluents can have biochemical oxygen demand levels far exceeding the domestic sewerage. We have these organic products. Once you put these organic products in the rivers, the microbial activity increases, and that reduces the oxygen, the overall oxygen, and therefore that runs counter to the aquatic life in the water body, leading to rapid depletion of dissolved oxygen and ecological stress in the aquatic environments. Ritual offerings further accelerate microbial activity, adding to the cumulative pollution. This reduces the dissolved oxygen, suffocating the aquatic life, while nutrient enrichment can trigger algal blooms, because a lot of organic waste has been put. Now the dissolved oxygen is reducing, and there is phosphates and other thing. Now it can lead to the algal bloom. So there can be the disproportionate increase of algae, right? Further degrading the water quality and disrupting biodiversity. The CPCB in its 2025 assessment identified 296 polluted river stretches from across 271 rivers, with water quality at over 800 locations, exceeding the safe limits for bathing. The CPCB also observed that, make sure that you know what CPCB is. Do let me know in the comment section what kind of body CPCB is. Is it a body made on the basis of an executive resolution? Is it a constitutional body, or is it a statutory body, or what kind of body it is? Do let me know in the comments. CPCB also observed that Yamuna in Delhi records BOD levels as high as 83 milligrams per liter, nearly 27 times the safe limit, effectively rendering stretches ecologically dead. A monitoring committee appointed by the National Green Tribunal in 2018 observed an unacceptable rise in the pollution levels in the Yamuna after idle emission, noting sharp increases in the heavy metals from paints and synthetic materials. You must have seen that we have the religious days. And then after we are done with that, we immerse the idol in the water, in the flowing river or in any pond. Now the degradable part of that idol, it would degrade. But what about the non-degradable part, the paints or the synthetics? That would be ingested by the aquatic animals. That would lead to bioaccumulation, biomagnification in subsequent food levels. So that is the issue, right? Empirical evidence from CPCB monitoring and peer-reviewed studies shows that the events like Kumbh Mela, Chhat Puja, Durga Puja, Ganesh Utsav raise BOD and solid waste levels. Rapid population growth has pushed the river degradation to the forefront of public concern, intensifying pressures on already fragile ecosystem. Previously, almost let's say 50 or 100 years back, we had very few people. Population was very less. So whatever religious rituals we used to follow, the river used to accommodate with that. But now the population has increased, and the intensity with which the people are exercising their religious beliefs, they're doing their religious rituals, that is compromising the very quality of these rivers, the very existence of these rivers, right, and the aquatic life. Traditions that evolved in an era of sparse population, less population, are now practiced at vastly larger scale, amplifying their ecological impact. In the context, it is worth asking if age-old practices need to be revisited and reimagined to ensure that devotion does not come at the cost of very rivers it seeks to honor. This is basically a kind of an honor you're giving to the river by offering the rituals, by performing the rituals. But that is compromising the very health of the rivers. So should we rethink about this particular thing? Yes. What does India's environmental laws entail? At the apex level, we have had the Supreme Court of India has reviewed the cases involving weakening environmental safeguards for the religious practices. Petitions rely on three legal foundations. What are the bases? The precautionary principle, the Water Act, and the Article 21 of the Constitution, which talks about a green environment. We had the cases of MC Mehta case, we had Ranjit Singh case, all link the aspects of clean environment with that of Article 21, right to life and personal liberty. Together with these establish that environmental protection is a binding legal obligation, even when balanced against religious freedoms. The NGT has enforced the CPCB's 2020 idle immersions guidelines, mandating artificial tanks or regulated zones for the immersions. So you cannot use any of these rivers or anything. There has to be designated places for the immersion of the idols. However, experts observe that no single law explicitly regulates such offerings as milk, flowers, oil, mass bathing as distinct category. Indian constitutional jurisprudence is clear that religious freedom under Article 25 is not absolute and can be restricted on grounds of public health. We have reasonable restriction, which is there in Article 25 itself. So that can be, the public health is one of the aspects, so that can be taken into consideration. Yet enforcement remains uneven due to the political sensitivities and lack of uniform guidelines on everyday ritual practice. The NGT has applied the principles such as polluter pays and precaution, reinforcing that faith cannot override ecological limits. Is per capita limit effective? So we have even minimal practices create a significant continuous pollution load. An analysis offering at Varanasi. So there's a case study over here which says on the ghats of Varanasi, average daily footfall is of around 2.5 lakhs, shows minimal offering of 5 ml of milk, 5 ml of oil and 1 flower per person. This is what one person contributes as far as the offerings to the river is concerned, translating to almost 1,250 liters of milk and oil each of both of them. So turning to almost 2,500 liters of both milk and oil, and 5 tons of flowers daily, excluding the ashes, public offerings and other waste. On peak days, this rises to almost 3,500 liters and 14 tons of waste. It is argued that per capita limits alone are insufficient. Effective regulation must combine site-specific caps, what this particular site can really accommodate, how much it can bear, that has to be the factor. Waste collection and diversion to ensure sustainable river management. The debate is not about curbing faith, but about recognizing the ecological limits, because everything has a limit, right? So there is a capacity to which the rivers can bear. That is what you'll have to understand. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is about the intellectual property rights. So we have a particular movie. Before even the release of the movie has been leaked. Now this points towards the overall framework with respect to the intellectual property. Vijay starrer Jana Nayagan was recently leaked online in its entirety, complete movie with very good quality. In high quality, while its theoretical release has been stuck in a limbo following the issues with respect to censor certificate. It has not been released in the theaters because of the issues involving the censorship, but it has already come in the online domain. So it has been pirated. Someone with legitimate access to the movie mishandled or intentionally spread it. Film piracy, though illegal, downloads is rampant, but it is less common for content to become available in the first place in such high quality. There are rampant practices of piracy, 100%. But in such a quality, in such matching almost the original content, that is rarity. That happens rarely. And we have observed in this. Therefore, someone in the team was actually responsible for diverting or for basically pirating this particular movie. What are the laws on piracy? The Copyright Act of 1957 deals extensively with the infringement of intellectual property such as movies, TV shows, books, articles, and other creative work. Section 63 and 63 capital A of the Copyright Act provides for fines up to 2 lakh rupees and 3 years of imprisonment. Repeat offenders can receive those penalties again for subsequent violations. The Cinematograph Act of 1952, since its amendment in 2023, provides for a much larger fine, 5% of the audited gross budget of a film. So these are two very important laws. It is uncommon for film piracy cases to be investigated and pursued with vigor, because in India, we don't really value the intellectual properties. And people are very comfortable with the piracy aspects. They don't see anything bad in it, right? India is consistently listed as notorious market by the US authorities, for instance, for anemic response to piracy. That is what you'll have to understand. How did this movie get leaked? How do studios protect against the leak? Ordinarily, movies are only leaked to pirates in high quality when they appear on OTT streaming platforms. If they are on OTT platforms, they can be leaked in high quality. This is because once this happens, in spite of the copy-resistant technologies employed by these platforms, for example, Netflix or Amazon Prime, pirates have found ways to defeat the digital rights management protections on such content and extract a video file that is close to the original stream quality. As such, withholding content access from audience at large altogether is a current gold standard. If only theater projectionists have the movie, and that too in an encrypted hard drive, it is much harder to copy. Invisible and barely visible watermarking enables the studios to instantly identify that who is the person who is involved in the piracy aspect. The perpetrator, if a copy is made from a legitimate theatrical print. That makes leaking an incredibly unattractive prospect. There is such a watermark for this particular film which has been leaked, but it is not yet clear if the version circulating online has enough forensic clues for investigators to zero in on a specific individual. What happens if the movie is already been leaked? It is incredibly challenging for a leaked film to be completely wiped from the internet. You must be aware, whatever we have the content on Telegram, once it is out there, right? So it's very difficult to basically control that content. For one, there are several sites constantly charging their domain names, constantly changing their domain names to evade judicial website blocking orders. Then we have private groups or messaging apps like Telegram, protocols like torrents, make the distribution of pirated content even harder to stem, to control. However, there still remains an industry of so-called anti-piracy firms like AIPlex, who work with the filmmakers, sports broadcasters, for example, we have Hotstar, and so on, to quickly send copyright takedown notices to social media platforms who generally act on that particular thing. And torrent sites, it is also common for filmmakers to approach the courts for the so-called dynamic injunctions that allow them to constantly provide high courts with links to the non-compliant sites URLs, after which they are blocked online. So there are measures which are there, but what you'll have to find is, what you need to understand is that when we talk about the piracy aspect, it's very normal in India, and there are no strict enforcement of the anti-piracy measures. There has to be the strict enforcement of these measures because we already have the laws in place, the Copyright Act or the Cinematograph Act, right? So this is what you'll have to understand. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is about the International Monetary Fund, which has come up with its report, the World Economic Outlook. Again, very important topic, has been asked in the prelims. So let's go through what IMF is all about. The International Monetary Fund was established during the Bretton Woods Conference held in New Hampshire, USA in July 1944, formally constituted on December 27, 1945. It was founded by 29 nations that signed the Articles of Agreement, which serve as its foundational document. The IMF commenced its financial activities from 1st of March 1947. The primary objective of the IMF include promoting global monetary cooperation, fostering trade and economic growth, and discouraging policies that could hinder prosperity. To achieve these objectives, member countries work together and engage with the other international organizations. What are the functions? The very first is the International Monetary Fund functions to promote global monetary cooperation, ensure exchange rate stability, facilitate balanced growth of international trade, provide financial assistance to the members, and offer policy advice to foster economic stability. In specific, financial assistance, you must be aware of the BOP crisis which India faced in early 1990s. And we sought the help of IMF, and it basically imposed some conditionalities in the form of SAPs, structural adjustment programs, reduce the fiscal deficit, reduce the subsidies, open the trade, let the other investors come from outside and invest in your country. Let there be free trade. So these are some of the conditionalities which IMF imposes once it helps the other country to basically bail out. IMF provides financial support to countries hit by financial crisis. Unlike development banks, IMF does not lend for the individual projects. IMF provides the lending instruments to countries on their needs, tailored according to their needs. For example, standby agreement, standby credit facility, extended fund facility, rapid credit facility, and others. Then what is the other function? Policy advice. The International Monetary Fund provides policy advice by monitoring the economic and financial policies of the member countries, identifying the risks, and recommending the adjustments. Capacity development. IMF provides technical assistance and training known as capacity development to member countries to strengthen their economic institutions, improve tax collections, and other things. International Monetary Fund governance structure. The IMF operates under a governance structure comprising of the Board of Governors, Executive Board, and the Managing Director. The Board of Governors, representing the 191 member countries, serve as the highest decision-making body, while the Executive Board conducts the institution's day-to-day operations under the leadership of Managing Director. Board of Governors, the highest decision-making body of the IMF, meets annually, approve the quota increases and SDR, special drawing rights, admit the new members, and compel the members' withdrawals. Each member country has one governor and one alternative governor. The Finance Minister of India, very important, is the ex-officio governor, with the RBI governor as the alternate governor. International Monetary and Financial Committee, IMFC, advises the Board of the Governors on matters related to the management of the international monetary and financial system. It has 24 members drawn from the governors. Executive Board, they're responsible for conducting the day-to-day operations, closely aligned with the managing directors. Reports published by IMF. This is very important. World Economic Outlook, published twice a year. Global Financial Stability Report, Fiscal Monitor Report, External Sector Report. So make sure that you keep a track of these reports, can be asked in the prelims. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic has a mention of UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, which says the West Asian crisis, the war among Iran and Israel and US on one side, this can lead to a turmoil, and this would threaten to push almost 2.5 million into poverty because of the large-scale destruction. So it's important to study what UNDP is all about. The United Nations Development Programme was formed on 22nd November 1965 and continues to serve a key international actor in the development cooperation. It provides technical expertise, financial assistance, and policy support to developing nations. Its mandate covers poverty reduction, crisis prevention, democratic governance and environmental sustainability, and development financing. UNDP works closely with the government, civil society, international institutions, and private partners to deliver development results. Its program ensures that the development is inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. The UNDP is headquartered in New York City and operates through a network of country offices. It is led by the administrator, who holds a rank of Under Secretary General of the UN. The administrator oversees the global workforce and supervises the regional bureaus that manage the development program across the continent. UNDP program budget. The UNDP is financed entirely through voluntary contributions from the UN member states. Remember this, very important. So it is financed completely by voluntary means. It does not receive funding through compulsory UN assessments. Funding includes core contributions and earmarked resources for specific programs. UNDP's total budget in 2022 was almost $6.73 billion. UNDP has been rated highly for financial transparency and ranked first in Aid Transparency Index. UNDP programs initiatives, for example, it comes with the very important Human Development Report since 91, introduced the Human Development Index, which measures the development beyond income. So it is the UNDP which publishes the HDI, Human Development Index. World Alliance Cities Against Poverty, ART, Global Initiative, Territorial Approach to Climate Change, Global Policy Centers in Seoul, Nairobi, in Kenya, and then we have Oslo, Singapore, and Istanbul, right? So this is what the UNDP does, very important body. Remember this. Let's go to the last topic. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion has a mention of Lebanon and Israel holding talks after many years, and this is a critical point as far as the geopolitics of West Asia is concerned. Let's look at the overall mapping of this particular region, very important. So we have this country of Lebanon. I think we have already discussed before that what is the Levant region. It comprises the countries of Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Cyprus. 5 countries, do remember, right? Now, what is this particular blue line? There are 2 important things. Litani River. So this is crossing. And now what has been agreed, what Israel wanted from Lebanon is that you move your security forces or Hezbollah. If there is this Hezbollah over there, which is fighting the Israelis, you move it beyond the Litani rivers to the northern side, right? So this is the Litani River, what you'll have to understand. And this is the blue line. Blue line is a de facto border between Israel and Lebanon. Remember, blue line. This is what we're talking about, the blue line. And the Golan Heights. Golan Heights, they are the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Means what? They were initially a part of Syria, but they are now occupied by Israel. That is what you'll have to understand. Golan Heights has come in the UPSC prelims examination. So remember, we have the Litani River. And also make understand that what are the bordering countries of Lebanon. We have Syria and we have Israel. There are 2 bordering countries. Lebanon, it shares boundary with the Mediterranean Sea. Remember, we have the Gaza Strip, which shares boundary with the Mediterranean Sea, but not the West Bank. West Bank is a landlocked portion within this particular area. And there you have, over here, you have the Jordan River. So basically, West Bank is on the western side of the Jordan River. That's the reason we call it the West Bank, right? We have Sea of Galilee, also known as Lake Tiberias. Very important. Sea of Galilee, also known as Lake Tiberias. And this is what the Dead Sea is. Dead Sea, why it is known as Dead Sea? Because the salinity is too much over here. It's too much, right? So I hope it is clear. Make sure that you go through this. Can be important, can be asked in the examination. Also make sure that you know which all are the landlocked countries, which countries have access to the sea. Jordan as such has no access to the sea, but it has the port as Aqaba in the Gulf of Aqaba, right? So we have the Red Sea, which basically bifurcates into the Gulf of Aqaba and the Gulf of Suez. So we have somewhere here the city of Aqaba, which gives Jordan the access to the Red Sea. I hope it's clear. That's all for today's discussion. I hope you really liked the discussion. All the very best. Thank you.